It is the winter of 1942, and the frozen landscape of the Leningrad front is silent, save for the crunch of boots on snow and the distant rhythmic thud of artillery. For the Soviet Red Army, the war has been a brutal, grinding struggle, but they have learned to fight the German Wehrmacht. They have learned to flank, to swarm, and to survive. But then, something emerges from the tree line that defies every lesson they have learned. It is a beast of iron and steel, square-shouldered and imposing, moving with a terrifying, deliberate grace. The 88mm gun mounted on its turret spits fire, and within seconds, T-34 tanks that were once considered the pinnacle of Soviet engineering are reduced to twisted, burning husks. This is the Tiger I. To the soldiers on the ground, it seems invincible. To the commanders in Berlin, it is the ultimate weapon of conquest. But as the smoke clears and the war drags on, a different truth emerges. This tank, this marvel of engineering, is not the key to victory. It is, in many ways, the architect of Germany's ruin. Today we peel back the layers of myth surrounding the Tiger to uncover why it terrified the world, and why, despite its lethal reputation, it was destined to fail. The story of the Tiger begins not on the battlefield, but in the frantic, desperate halls of German high command. Following the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, the Wehrmacht encountered the T-34 and the KV-1. These tanks were shockers. They had sloped armour that deflected German anti-tank shells like rain off a tin roof. The Germans, who had conquered Europe with superior tactics and reliable, if lightly armoured Panzer IIIs and IVs, suddenly found themselves outclassed. The panic was real. They needed an answer, and they needed it yesterday. The Tiger was born from this existential fear. It was designed to be a breakthrough tank, a heavy-hitting spearhead meant to punch holes in enemy lines that no other vehicle could penetrate. When the Tiger finally rolled into action, the psychological impact was immediate. Imagine you are a young Sherman crewman in Normandy, 1944. You have been told your tank is the best in the world. You have been told you can win through mobility and fire support. Then you see it. A shape looming through the hedgerows. A silhouette so distinct and hulking that it sends a chill down your spine. Your 75mm gun, which has served you well across North Africa and Sicily, suddenly feels like a pop gun. You fire, and the shell bounces off the Tiger's frontal plate with a hollow ring. The Tiger turns, its turret rotating with a hydraulic hiss, and you know, with absolute cold certainty, that you are already dead. This was the Tiger phobia. It was a tangible, paralysing fear that gripped Allied tank crews. But beneath that terrifying exterior, the Tiger was a logistical nightmare. It was a masterpiece of over-engineering. German designers, obsessed with perfection, created a vehicle so complex that it required a small army of specialised mechanics just to keep it running. While an American Sherman could be repaired in the field with a wrench and a bit of ingenuity, the Tiger demanded precision. If a transmission failed, the entire turret had to be lifted off to access the components. If a track broke, you needed specialised equipment to move the massive, heavy links. It was a tank that demanded a stable, well-supplied rear area, but the German army was increasingly finding itself in a war of retreat, constant movement, and dwindling supplies. Consider the sheer weight of the beast. At over 55 tons, it was a behemoth. It was too heavy for most European bridges, which meant it required specialised engineering support to cross rivers. It was too heavy for standard railway flat cars, requiring the tracks to be removed and replaced with narrower ones just to transport it to the front. In the heat of battle, these were not just inconveniences, they were fatal flaws. A Tiger that cannot cross a river is a bunker, not a tank. A Tiger that breaks down on a narrow road during a retreat is a roadblock that must be blown up by its own crew to prevent capture. The Germans built a precision instrument, but they deployed it in the chaos of a total war. The myth of the Tiger is also inextricably linked to the men who commanded them. The German Panzer aces, names like Michael Wittmann, have become legendary. These men were often highly skilled, operating in a tactical environment that prioritised the preservation of the tank and the accumulation of kills. At the Battle of Villers-Bocage, Wittmann single-handedly devastated a British armoured column, using the Tiger's superior range and armour to pick off targets one by one. These stories were gold for German propaganda. They painted a picture of a German soldier who could take on 10, 20, or even 30 Allied tanks and emerge unscathed. But these stories obscured the reality of the war. They ignored the thousands of Tigers that were abandoned, out of fuel, or simply broken down miles from the front line. The Allied response to the Tiger was not to build a better tank, but to build more tanks, and to use them smarter. The Americans and the British realised that they couldn't win a head-on fight with a Tiger, so they stopped fighting that way. They used air superiority to hunt Tigers from the sky. They used artillery to pin them down, and they used superior numbers to flank them. If you cannot penetrate the front armour, you hit the tracks, you hit the sides, you swarm the tank until the crew is forced to abandon it. The Tiger was a tactical marvel, but it was a strategic failure. It was too expensive, too slow to build, and too resource-intensive for an economy that was being bombed into oblivion. By late 1944, the German industrial machine was gasping for air. The raw materials needed to produce a single Tiger, the high-grade steel, the precision optics, the massive engines, could have been used to produce 3 or 4 Panzer IVs or Stu-G assault guns. The Stug in particular was a revelation. It was cheaper, easier to produce, and remarkably effective in a defensive role. It could hide in the brush, wait for an enemy tank, and put a round through its side before the enemy even knew it was there. The German High Command, however, remained infatuated with the Tiger. They believed that a handful of super tanks could turn the tide. They were wrong. They were chasing the ghost of a decisive victory that had slipped through their fingers years ago. The Tiger also suffered from a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of modern warfare. The tank was a tool of the blitzkrieg, a weapon of movement and speed. But the Tiger was slow. Its fuel consumption was astronomical. In the vast open steppes of Russia, the Tiger was a thirsty, lumbering target. In the cramped, hedgerow-choked landscape of Normandy, it was a sitting duck. It was designed for a battlefield that no longer existed by 1943. It was a weapon of the past, dressed up in the armour of the future. As we look back at the Tiger, we see the tragic irony of the German war effort. The Germans were brilliant engineers, but they were poor strategists. They built the most feared tank of the war, a machine that could dominate any individual engagement. But they failed to recognise that war is not a series of individual engagements. War is logistics. War is production. War is the ability to sustain a force over months and years. The Tiger was a sprint runner in a marathon. It was built to win a battle, but it was completely incapable of winning a campaign. The soldiers who crewed the Tigers were, by and large, exceptional. They were highly trained, often fanatically dedicated, and they fought with a desperation that is hard to fathom today. Many of them believed they were part of a new order, a force that would reshape the world, but they were ultimately betrayed by their own leadership. They were sent into battle in tanks that were destined to be abandoned, not because they were defeated by enemy fire, but because the fuel ran out or the transmission gave up the ghost. The tragedy of the Tiger is the tragedy of the Third Reich itself, a pursuit of absolute power through absolute technical superiority, while ignoring the crumbling foundations of reality. Today, the Tiger is a collector's item, a museum piece that draws crowds of enthusiasts who marvel at its size and its history. But we must look past the steel and the myth. We must see the Tiger for what it truly was, a symbol of a regime that prioritised the aesthetic of power over the reality of victory. It was a terror weapon, designed to shock and awe, but it could not stop the tide of history. It remains a stark reminder that in war, the most impressive weapon is not always the best one. Sometimes, the most effective weapon is the one that works, the one that can be built in the thousands, and the one that can be maintained in the mud and the blood of the front line. As the war reached its final, desperate months, the Tiger became a symbol of the German collapse. They were used to plug gaps in the line, to defend vital road junctions, and to hold back the inevitable advance of the Allies. They were often operated by inexperienced crews or by veterans who had seen their friends die in burning wrecks for years. There is a haunting quality to the final days of these machines. The way they were left in the streets of Berlin, their guns pointed at the approaching Red Army, their engines cold, their crews gone. They were the ultimate expression of Germany's military ambition, and they ended as nothing more than scrap metal, silent witnesses to a catastrophe of their own making. The lessons of the Tiger are still studied by military historians today. They teach us about the dangers of over-engineering, the importance of logistics, and the folly of believing that a single wonder weapon can change the course of a war. The Tiger was not a failure because it was a bad tank. It was a failure because it was the wrong tank for the war that was being fought. It was a triumph of engineering, but a disaster of strategy. And that, perhaps, is the most important lesson of all. The machine is only as good as the plan behind it. As we conclude this journey into the history of the Tiger, let us reflect on the human cost. Behind every Tiger that was destroyed were men who lived, fought, and died in terror. Whether they were the Allied tankers who faced them in the hedgerows, or the German crews who manned them in the freezing cold of the east, they were all caught in the grinding gears of a conflict that had spiralled far beyond the control of those who started it. The Tiger was a monster of iron, but it was built by men, and it was destroyed by men. It remains a testament to the extremes of human ingenuity and the depths of human destruction. The Tiger was a legend, a myth, and a reality. It was a tank that terrified the world and still failed. It stands as a powerful reminder that history is not written by the machines we build, but by the choices we make. And in the final analysis, the Tiger's legacy is not one of victory, but one of caution. It reminds us that no matter how powerful a weapon may be, it cannot compensate for a loss of perspective, a failure of strategy, or the cold, hard reality of a war that has been lost long before the first shot is fired. The Tiger remains a hollow shell, a monument to a dream of conquest that left nothing behind but smoke, ruin, and the echoes of a war that changed the world forever. The roar of the Tiger's engine may have been silenced decades ago, but the lessons it leaves behind are as loud as ever. It was a beast that defined an era, a machine that pushed the boundaries of technology and tested the limits of endurance. It was a weapon that terrified everyone, and yet it could not save the empire that birthed it. As we look at the remnants of these machines today, let us not just see the iron and the steel. Let us see the history, the tragedy, and the enduring human struggle that lies beneath the surface of every war machine and every war story. For in the end, it is not the tank that tells the story, but the people who fought, the people who survived, and the people who remember. The Tiger was a marvel of the 20th century, a pinnacle of industrial power, and a symbol of the immense destructive capacity of the nation that built it. Its story is one of complexity, frustration, and eventual defeat. It is a story that continues to fascinate, to educate, and to warn. And as we continue to explore the history of the Second World War, the Tiger will always stand as one of its most iconic and most controversial chapters. It was a tank that changed the way we think about armoured warfare, and its legacy will continue to be felt for generations to come. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the Tiger tank. We have travelled from the drawing boards of German engineers to the frozen battlefields of Russia and the hedgerows of Normandy. We have seen the Tiger in its glory and its defeat, and we have uncovered the truths behind the myths. We hope this story has provided you with a deeper understanding of one of history's most infamous weapons, and the complex, often tragic, reality of the war that defined the modern world. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to uncover the stories that shaped our past and influence our future. Until then, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep looking for the truth behind the history.